Europe is completely reconsidering its approach to supporting Ukraine and understands that the United States may completely withdraw its support for our country, and therefore the entire burden of support falls specifically on the shoulders of the European Union and European partners. Today, American President Donald Trump stated that he does not know whether he will support strengthening sanctions against the Russian Federation, which will be voted on in the United States Senate as early as next week. The American president noted that he needs to familiarize himself with the contents of the bill before making a decision. Well, it's as if he doesn't know at all what this is about. And let me remind you, we're talking about tariffs of 500% against all countries that in one way or another help Russia wage war against Ukraine and continue to trade with it. In light of this, Europe has chosen to fully reassess its strategy for aiding Ukraine. And now, British and French officials are shifting their focus from the issue of deploying troops in Ukraine to the question of supporting Kiev's defense without the backing of the United States of America. And against this backdrop, we have a very interesting statement from retired British Army Colonel Richard Kemp, who suddenly called for the United Kingdom to help Ukraine create its own nuclear weapons, amid the potential for America to turn away. My name is Pechii. Today is May 31st. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like this episode, and write your comment. Also, subscribe to the Telegram channel, Pechii News. The link to it is in the description of this video. Let's go through everything step by step now. I'll start with a statement by Donald Trump, who said today that he doesn't know whether he will support the bill to strengthen sanctions against Russia, which was prepared in the United States Senate. When he was asked what he would do about it, he replied, "I don't know, I have to see it, I'll look at it, and then I'll answer." Well, let me remind you that the United States may significantly strengthen sanctions against Russia in response to the ongoing aggression against Ukraine. In particular, Senators Lindsey Graham, a Republican, and Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat, have introduced a bipartisan bill that provides for tough economic restrictions. The main provisions of the bill are as follows: secondary sanctions, the introduction of 500% tariffs on imports from countries that purchase Russian oil, gas, uranium, and other resources. This is aimed at putting pressure on Russia's partners such as China, India, and Turkey. Sanctions against Russian banks and energy companies, restrictions on the activities of key financial and energy institutions of Russia, plus asset blocking, that is, freezing the assets of individuals and companies that support Russia's military actions. This bill has the support of 82 senators and could be considered in the Senate as early as next week. However, for it to come into force, it must pass the House of Representatives and be signed by President Donald Trump, who is still cautious about new sanctions, fearing that they could complicate peace negotiations. And against this backdrop, a British publication writes that British and French officials are shifting their focus from deploying troops in Ukraine to the issue of supporting Kiev's defense without the backing of the United States of America. According to the publication, British and French officials who are developing a plan to deploy peacekeeping forces in Ukraine have discussed the need to realistically assess the situation with Donald Trump stepping away from the issue of supporting Ukraine. The officials agreed to shift the focus from deploying European troops to support a ceasefire to supporting the long-term defense of Kiev against a Russian invasion without American assistance. There is now a serious concern that the United States president will carry out his threat and refuse the role of mediator, having failed to bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. Let's be realistic and admit that the United States will never be fully on our side, said one of the Western officials, describing the tense atmosphere at the meeting in The Hague. A European diplomat added, "The discussion was mainly about how to maintain the necessary support for Ukraine when we assume that the United States will continue to provide only certain specific resources, such as intelligence." We also agreed on the need to increase economic pressure on Russia. The meeting in the capital of the Netherlands, attended by the so-called political directors of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, marked a sharp shift in roles. In the coalition of the willing, created by Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron to support a possible ceasefire, which both Ukrainians and Americans are striving for. So Keir Starmer and Macron are promoting the proposal for a coalition of the willing, according to which European allies will use their soldiers to help ensure compliance with any peace agreement. More than 30 countries have expressed their support, although only a few of them have publicly offered to deploy troops on the territory of Ukraine. In addition, at this meeting in The Hague, the central question was whether Washington is ready to provide what British officials have called security guarantees or support for peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. The group has not yet publicly acknowledged that its intentions have changed, as the chances for peace diminish while Putin resists international pressure demanding a ceasefire. Accordingly, peacekeeping forces are becoming less and less relevant. European countries also agreed to invite Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to the NATO summit in The Hague next month. And earlier, I remind you, his participation was in question after Donald Trump openly spoke out against Ukraine joining the Western military alliance. General Kit Kellogg, Donald Trump's special representative for Ukraine, stated the following on Friday: "We have said that for us, the issue of Ukraine joining NATO is not on the agenda. And we are not the only country saying this. You know, I can probably name 4 countries in NATO that are against this. And in order for you to be allowed to join NATO, you need 32 out of 32 members. Well, that means everyone has to agree. Probably the coalition of supporters will continue to publicly support Donald Trump's peace efforts at the request of Ukrainian officials, who fear that otherwise the United States leader will stop supplying weapons and sharing intelligence." Well, although Washington has not approved new arms deliveries since Donald Trump took office, it still continues to supply equipment that was agreed upon during Joe Biden's administration. The United States has also approved the sale of American-made components to Ukraine, such as spare parts for F-16 fighter jets, and has allowed European countries to supply American-made equipment as well. Well, that's it. The meeting in the capital of the Netherlands is taking place on the eve of an important week for diplomacy, because it is expected that on Monday, June 2nd, the next round of negotiations between the Ukrainian and Russian delegations will take place in Istanbul. And it is expected that on Monday, the National Security Advisor in the United Kingdom will take part in the next round of peace talks. General Kit Kellogg stated the following the day before: "We will have what we call E3. These are national security advisors from Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. When we were in London, they kind of helped us form the main conditions for Ukraine. At the beginning of this month, the first direct talks in more than 3 years of full-scale war between Moscow and Kiev took place in the Turkish capital." Well, and on Friday, the Kremlin said that it would discuss the terms of a ceasefire only at talks in Istanbul after Kiev demanded a peace memorandum. Before the start of the talks, Ukraine stated that it would like to see a document outlining Russia's peace proposal before committing to send its officials to Istanbul. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Andriy Sybiga, stated that in order for the next planned meeting to be substantive and meaningful, it is important to receive the document in advance so that the delegation attending has the authority to discuss the relevant positions. Earlier this week, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced a second round of negotiations. After Trump and Putin spoke on the phone, and after Trump began openly criticizing the Russian dictator. In particular, the United States President called his Russian counterpart crazy and accused him of playing with fire. After that, apparently, he gave him a 2-week deadline to make a deal. But this is, again, just an assumption, because Trump has been talking about these 2 weeks for at least 2 months already. And in addition to this, we have an interesting statement from retired British Army Colonel Richard Kemp, which is taking place in Odessa. He stated today that the United Kingdom, as a guarantor of Ukraine's security, should help Ukraine create its own nuclear weapons. Next, I will quote him: "The United Kingdom should help Ukraine develop its own nuclear weapons within the framework of the Strategic Partnership Agreement." This is an interesting point, because in fact the United Kingdom is one of the countries that signed the Budapest Memorandum in 1994. It guaranteed Ukraine's security in case of an attack. So Kemp says that, first of all, the Budapest Memorandum, And secondly, this strategic partnership agreement that was signed at the beginning of the year for 100 years implies that Britain should not just guarantee Ukraine's security in words, but also help Ukraine restore its nuclear status. A bold statement, I don't know, you can react to it in different ways. Well, I think it's more of a populist statement, of course, but how do you feel about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this episode. The main conclusion right now is that Europe, well, really, everyone has already completely shifted their thinking to the fact that Europe's security is in Europe's own hands. You can hope for the United States, but you shouldn't rely only on them. That at some point a decision needs to be made about further support for Ukraine without the participation of the United States of America, and accordingly to build their own support strategy based on this. So I'll leave it at that for now. Again, I'll repeat myself. Your opinion, your conclusions, please write them in the comments under this episode. If you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so financially with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video, or by using the quick response code on your screens. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.